anniversary trip turned into horror when I kissed another guy. Now my husband wants to leave me.
Going to Portugal was supposed to be a moment to remember. My ex-husband and I went there for our anniversary. If only I knew that it would have been our last anniversary, I would have canceled everything. Now I'm all alone with my children, but no husband. I sometimes think I'm dreaming that after 10 years he would just dump me like that. I blew it big time, and I don't think he'll ever forgive me. The way he looked at me, he was disgusted. He was such a loving guy and very nice man. He was my man, but not anymore. If I were to turn back the hands of time, I would rewind everything and unkiss the surfer. I don't even know what came over me and how I ended up kissing him. It is really confusing. Yes, I agree the surfer was handsome and all that, but that didn't give me a privilege to kiss another man while I was married and with my husband, the worst part on our anniversary. I know I can't undo the kissing, but please help me on how I should have done things. If there is someone who can relate or has done the similar thing, please tell me how you deal with the guilt and regret. I, female 27, met my ex-husband, male 30, when I was 16 years old. We grew up in the same neighborhood in New York City and went to the same high school. He was a few grades ahead of me, but nothing stopped us from dating. He approached me, and in my mind, I thought he wanted to play me. He was very handsome and fit. He also played football. Every time he would ask me out, I would reject him. I didn't want to be on his hit list, and also I played hard to see if he was serious about me, and he was not. He never gave up after a few months, so I gave our relationship a shot. He was so romantic, he took me out whenever he was free. Bought me flowers. I was so in love with him. He graduated in high school and went to the Culinary Institute of New York to learn more about cooking. He wanted to be the world's greatest chef and expand the family business. When he graduated, I thought our relationship was over, but he came back for me. On my high school graduation, he proposed. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I didn't go to college. I moved in with my ex-husband. We dated for a couple of months. I had already met his family and vice versa, and we decided to tie the knot after 7 months of dating. We loved each other so much to a point that some would even call us twins or siblings because that was how inseparable we were. He would go anywhere and everywhere with me, but that was before we had children, which we got on our first year anniversary. It was the happiest year of our lives. He was really supportive and loving. Everything was perfect until when our 10 years anniversary approached. I don't even know if he remembered our anniversary date, the way he was so distant and distracted. We had perfect children, a perfect home. I couldn't believe it had been 10 years since my husband Marcus and I had been married. He was my best friend, my keeper, and my strength. He was and still is a good father to our children. But I ruined all that. Sigh. Our love for each other had only grown stronger with each passing year. We had 2 beautiful children, a lovely home, and a happy, comfortable life together. But as our anniversary approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Marcus had been distant and preoccupied for weeks, and I couldn't understand why. I tried to brush it off as just a phase, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. I decided to plan a special anniversary trip to the beach, hoping that it would bring us closer together and reignite the spark in our relationship. I booked a beautiful beachfront house, complete with a private pool and a stunning view of the ocean. I spent hours planning the perfect itinerary, complete with romantic dinners, sunset walks on the beach, and relaxing spa treatments. The day of our anniversary finally arrived, and I was filled with excitement and anticipation. Marcus seemed distant and distracted as we packed our bags and headed out the door, but I tried not to let it dampen my spirits. As we arrived at our destination, I was struck by the breathtaking beauty of the beach. The sun was shining, the waves were crashing, and the salty ocean air filled my lungs. I felt a sense of peace and tranquility wash over me, and I knew that this was exactly what we needed. We spent the first few days of our trip relaxing and reconnecting. We took long walks on the beach, held hands, and talked about our dreams and aspirations. It felt like the old us was back, and I was filled with hope and joy. I didn't know if my husband was really happy or he was pretending to be happy just for my sake. But whatever mood he was in was great because we enjoyed our day until he excused himself and said he had an important call to make to check on his hotel and restaurant business. I understood and excused him because I knew how much he loved his business, so he would always be fussy about it and check how it was every now and then. He was too overprotective of his business. I remember when I would complain about him spending more time in his hotel or in a restaurant to make sure everything was running smoothly. He would tell me that these two businesses were his first children before our two beautiful babies. So he had to protect their legacy any way possible, even if he had managers, but he still wanted to run it himself. The previous day, my husband and I were taking a walk. Funny enough, he knew my husband from social media and papers because his restaurant and hotel business was well known, and he was planning on opening another restaurant in Portugal. He was really friendly and the conversation was flowing, but I was drooling over the guy. I was just washing my eyes and seeing what others were not seeing. I know it was wrong, but the truth must be told. There are perfect God's creatures out there, and it's not a crime to feed your eyes a little. As we talked, I found myself feeling drawn to Jake in a way that I hadn't felt in years. He was charming, confident, and had a sense of adventure that was infectious. I couldn't help but be drawn to him, even though I knew it was wrong. But my husband was not paying attention to me anymore. It was like we were there on a business trip and not our anniversary. He was always talking about business even in our bedroom, which made me somehow bored because it was always a business conversation every now and then, nothing about us. Even our intimate moments were no longer the same. I had thought the trip was going to help us reconnect, but I guess I was the only one who was investing in this marriage. But then, something unexpected happened. As we were sitting by the pool, enjoying a refreshing drink before Marcus, my ex-husband, went to make an important call, I saw him. A handsome surfer with piercing blue eyes and a chiseled jawline. Well, I had already seen him, so it was the second time seeing him and I couldn't get him off my head. He was tall, with broad shoulders and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through me. We struck up a conversation, and before I knew it, we were laughing and joking like old friends. He was like those men who had a perfectly built body with sexy fit body shape like the type of that Italian actor Simone Susina from the 365 Days film. He passed to greet us, and I couldn't help but stare at his perfect body. Yes, my husband's body was flames, and all but the surfer took my attention that day. And I regret ever looking at another man either than my own. We had planned to spend 2 weeks in Portugal with my husband, just to have more time to ourselves and spend more quality time alone without the children. And it was great. My main aim was to bring back the Marcus I had fallen in love with, and bring back the spark that was there when we started dating. I needed my husband back, and my plan actually worked until he told me after 3 days of us in Portugal that he had to go back to New York. I couldn't believe him, but I couldn't deny him to go. So he went back to New York alone, and I was left in Portugal to finish off my holidays. So as I stayed back in Portugal, I decided to take surfing lessons. So I asked Jake to teach me how to because I had been interested in surfing since I was a kid, but I couldn't get time to learn it. I found it fascinating, and it had been a bonus for me to learn how to surf while I was enjoying the trip, even though my husband had left. Luckily, Jake agreed to teach me how to surf, and I was more than happy. That was how I and Jake got close. As the days passed, my husband was still not back, so I found myself spending more and more time with Jake, the surfer. We would go for walks on the beach, have long conversations by the pool, and even go on a surfing lesson together. It was exhilarating, and I felt alive in a way that I hadn't felt in years. But despite the excitement, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was doing something wrong. I loved Marcus, and I knew that I shouldn't have kissed another man, no matter how handsome and charming he was. But I had always felt a sense of dissatisfaction in my marriage, and that kiss had made me realize that I deserved more. It had already been a week of me in Portugal, meaning I only had a few days left to enjoy my holidays, and my heart was broken, because I was enjoying Portugal more. I had been trying to reach out to my husband, but he was not reachable. His phone was either ringing unanswered or it would go straight to voicemail. What made me worried was when I couldn't reach him on his office phone numbers. I had thought there was something wrong that had happened. But as time went by, I started suspecting that he was cheating on me. I couldn't just shake off that feeling, and some of you know how true a woman's guts gets sometimes. If the lady suspects that you are cheating, that means her conscience is really telling her the truth. It's like we are prophets. And that led to spending more time with Jake because I was getting lonely, and I was getting stressed about my husband, and the thoughts of him cheating on me were playing in my head. Jake was a great distraction to forget about my husband's disappearance. What infuriated me the most was the fact that when I called home to check on the children, they would tell me that Marcus was around and he was fine. My woman instincts were telling me a lot. It really hurt me to know that I was worried about someone who didn't even think about his own wife. That was what made me spend more time with Jake, and I was pretty much enjoying every moment of it. So one night, Jake had taken me out to introduce me to one of the clubs near the hotel I was staying in. I got too comfortable with him. We were like best buddies, and I had so much fun in that club to a point that I found myself drinking all my sorrows away. Marcus was stressing me out, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that he was doing something wrong back at home. I hoped and prayed that he was not doing something that would jeopardize our relationship and destroy our marriage. After I was tired of drinking and dancing, Jake and I sat down and talked, He was not just a lousy surfer, he was really smart too. So as we were talking, I don't even know what came over me, but the more he was talking, the more I craved to taste his sexy pinkish lips. They were really appetizing, I won't lie. I don't know if I saw them like that because I was kind of tipsy because of the cocktails I was drinking, but I really craved for the surfer's lips so bad. I was acting a bit sluttish, right? I had been staring at him, well, more like his lips, until I couldn't hold myself anymore, so I kissed him. I don't know what came over me that time, but I regret it. I couldn't believe it. But despite the excitement, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was doing something wrong. I loved Marcus, and I knew that I shouldn't have been kissing another man, no matter how handsome and charming he was. I had just kissed a handsome surfer on our 10-year anniversary trip. That was a very low and cheap move for me, but I can't take it back. Crazy enough, I enjoyed it. My husband was a great kisser. I gave him that, but Jake the surfer was the best. So as we were spending a lot of time together, Jake and I, there was this time when Jake was off duty, so he came to see me because I only had like 2 days left for my holiday trip to end, and something unexpected happened. As we were sitting by the pool, Jake took my hand and looked into my eyes. "I have to tell you something," he said, his voice low and serious. "I have feelings for you, and I want to be with you. Will you be my girlfriend?" And I was really shocked and kind of confused because the guy had seen me with my husband. It was just that my husband left to attend to the businesses. I couldn't believe that he would just drop such a huge bomb to a married woman just because I kissed him. Well, more like we kissed each other once, but that shouldn't have made him think I could be his girlfriend. I mean, I was married, and I loved my husband so much. And I was already regretting what we did because if my husband was to find out, a lot would be destroyed. I won't lie and say the kiss was sloppy or bad because it was not, and somehow I was kind of feeling Jake, not as a boyfriend, of course, but when he confessed, I was taken aback, unsure of what to say. I loved John, but I couldn't deny the feelings that I had for Jake. I was torn and I didn't know what to do. It was like I was stuck between a rock and a very hard place. I mean, my husband had started pulling stunts at me. Though I didn't have any proof that he was cheating, I couldn't shake off that feeling, I really don't know when and how my husband saw me or came back, because I was not even expecting him anymore. He was supposed to come back about a week ago, but he didn't. And he decided to come back when I only have 2 days to go back home. I was really angry at him because he had been ignoring me, my calls and texts the whole time. Then he decided to just pitch up at a later stage. The worst part, Jake and I were sitting a bit too close to each other. So Marcus saw that, he got pretty angry, and things went south pretty fast. My husband was just in awe, and if I were to lie and tell that famous lying phrase of, "It's not what you think," or "It's not how it looks like," and try to explain what had happened, knowing very well what had happened, and Marcus saw it. So it was not going to work because he had caught red-handed, kissing the surfer. As we sat there, Marcus asked what was going on and words got stuck in my tongue. I am not a person who just get tongue-tied. I always have answers for everything, but that day I was stuck, and I froze on the spot. It was like my mind went into another freezing zone and it couldn't think properly. My heart was beating pretty fast. I didn't know what to do. And Jakey, on another hand, he just sat there and looked his husband in the eyes. I couldn't believe the guy. He should have just apologized and left, but no. He sat there waiting for whatever Marcus was going to do. After some time, I contained myself and came back from the freezing zone that my mind was in. So I hesitated, not wanting to hurt Marcus, but also not wanting to lie to him. I've been spending time with Jake, I said, my voice trembling, not because I was scared of Marcus, but I was scared of the outcome that would take place. I didn't want to lose Marcus over a surfer. Yes, the guy was charming, handsome, and sexy and all, but I didn't want to lose my husband. Marcus was my strength, so I couldn't allow a guy that I had met 2 seconds ago to destroy what Marcus and I had built. I had to tell the truth and hope for a better outcome. 2 days later, my husband and I went back to New York. He didn't talk to me for that whole 2 days. The only thing he did on our way back home was glancing at me with eyes full of suspicion and anger. He was pretty angry at me. I know I had done him wrong, but if he was there with me, none of that would have happened. But I couldn't tell him that because it would sound like I was selfish for wanting to spend more time with him. But he decided to put his business first over his wife. So over the next few days, my husband became more and more distant. He stopped talking to me and started spending all of his time with our kids. I knew that something was wrong, but I had no idea what it was because as much as I did him wrong, I told him the truth of what was happening between Jake and I. I could sense that he was hiding something from me. The way he was acting was selling him off. I didn't know that Marcus would not believe the truth that I had told him and actually go investigate me and Jake. So after a week of us back at home, he came back from work and asked to speak to me. If I knew what he wanted to talk about, I wouldn't have agreed to have a talk with him, but I didn't know. So at me down and told me that he knew about what I did. I started getting confused because obviously he knew what I did. I mean, he saw me kissing another man, and I had thought we were past that. But then he told me that he had found out about what had been going on between Jake and I. He told me that he couldn't believe the lie I had told him, so he decided to run an investigation to see if what I did with Jake was only a kiss he saw, or there was more to it. He told me that he saw a video of me at the club kissing the surfer. I couldn't believe that he went behind my back and did that. He even told me that I was just like all the other loose and cheap women, who are always looking for fun and good times with other men. That really stung because the way he said those words, it was like he was swearing at me. It really hurt me to hear him say that, but the voice that he used to say those words was a mix of anger, disappointment, hurt, and sadness. I knew there and then that I had hurt my husband in the worst way possible. I felt a stinging sensation in my eyes as his words hit their mark. I had never been one to cheat on my husband, but I had let my desires get the better of me. I tried apologizing to him, but he didn't want to hear it. The only thing he wanted to know was why I did that, meaning I had to come clean. Hoping he would understand and we find a common ground to solve whatever happened. I mean, it was not like I slept with the surfer. It was just a kiss, so I told him that it was not my intention to hurt him, but I just needed something more in my life. I mean, he was always busy, for me or our kids. The only time he would spend time with us was during dinner, or spend time with the kids and not me. And even our bedroom activities were no longer exciting and affectionate. Instead of him understanding my concerns, he started swearing at me, telling me that I had always been like this, calling me selfish and reckless. Worst part, he spitted that he was regretting ever marrying me, and that he should have known better than to marry me. Only if he had listened to his friends, none of this would have happened. I had no comeback to what he was saying. The way I was hurt, my heart was bleeding. I thought to myself that his friends had once told him not to marry me. I didn't understand why. I know I was a forward and somehow reckless, but I had never cheated on Marcus ever since we had started dating. I loved him too much to do him like that. I felt a wave of sadness wash over me as I realized that my marriage was over. Marcus had never been a good husband ever since he started his restaurant and hotel businesses, but I had always hoped that he would change. Now it seemed that he was just like all the other men, using and discarding women when they no longer served their purposes. He said that he couldn't trust me anymore and that he wanted a divorce. I couldn't let him give up on us and our marriage just for one silly mistake. I tried reasoning with him and apologizing. I couldn't let Jake destroy my marriage and my family like that. I had to try and make him understand what had come over me. I mean, as much as I had done him wrong, but he pushed me to it, with his absence and his businesses. He knew I would never hurt him intentionally, but I needed to find myself also. I mean, we started dating when we were very young, so I didn't know how it was like to feel another male person, because I only knew him as the male in my life. I was devastated. I had never expected this to happen, and I didn't know how to react. I tried to explain to my husband that Jake and I only kissed once, and that the only thing I did wrong with Jake was kissing him in the club and spending time with him because he was not there. I told him that I still loved him, and I didn't want to lose him over a stranger that we had met on our trip, but he had already made up his mind. He told me that I would never find another man who would love me like he did. He called me a foolish woman who always chased after my own desires without thinking about the consequences. Which was true, but I had done that only once, not always. My mind and heart couldn't digest the fact that my husband had left me for one silly mistake that I had made. If I knew that the anniversary trip we had was the last one, I wouldn't have gone, and I wouldn't have done what I did. But we cannot take what had happened back right, and what was done was already done, and there was no undoing it. I was heartbroken. I had lost the man I loved, and the life we had built together. I was left with nothing but a deep sadness and a sense of confusion. But as a few months passed, I began to realize that the separation between my husband and I had given me a chance to rediscover myself, even though it had been a struggle to cope with the loss of my husband and the guilt of my infidelity. But I had always put my family and my marriage first, but now I had the opportunity to focus on myself and my own desires. I mean, Marcus was my first everything, my first love, my keeper, my happy place. We even got married, and I never even had time to enjoy my youth phase and find myself in what I loved, which resulted me to not even go to college. I moved in with him, and he proposed right after I'd graduated from high school. I knew that my marriage was over, the day Marcus saw me kissing Jake, but the memories of our past love and the pain of my present situation made it difficult to let go. Months passed, I began to realize that my mistake or infidelity had not only cost me my marriage, but also my self-respect. I felt lost and alone, with no direction or purpose. I started drinking and going out a lot, getting reckless until I woke up in a hospital bed. I was really depressed and shutted. From there, I knew that I needed to make amends and find a way to heal. Not only for myself, but for my children also. I had been distant from them for months. I didn't even make means to see them since they were living with Marcus's family. I had neglected my children, which was very wrong of me. So I started taking surfing lessons again, and I found that I loved the feeling of the waves and the rush of adrenaline. I also started exploring my own interests and hobbies, and I discovered a whole new side of myself that I had never known existed. One day, while I was out for a run, I saw a flyer for a surfing competition at the beach nearby. I decided to attend, hoping to find some closure and maybe even see her former lover again. I couldn't enter the competition as I was still learning, but watching other surfers made me fall more in love with the sport. As I watched the surfers ride the waves, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I then realized that my love for Marcus was still strong, and I needed to fight for our marriage. The divorce was not yet finalized, and I still had a chance to at least try and make my marriage work again. With renewed determination, I reached out to Marcus and begged for forgiveness. I promised to do whatever it took to regain his trust and love. I loved this man. He was my first everything, my first kiss, my virginity breaker, my best friend, my strength. And without him, I knew that I had made the biggest mistake of my life. I couldn't go on without my strength. I was struggling so much to a point that I even thought of taking drugs. But I would think of him and how he would feel if he was to find that out too. Or our children see or find out that their mother was acting like a junkie. I begged Marcus, and he was hesitant at first, but he eventually agreed to give our marriage another chance. I was so happy to be given another chance to prove myself again and be with my family again. I was glad that he didn't tell his family about our separation. I won't lie and say the separation didn't help me, because it did help me a lot. It gave me time to find myself and think about what I wanted to do with my life. Yes, I didn't have any college qualification, but I uncovered my hidden skills and talents, which was surfing. Over the next few months, I worked tirelessly to rebuild my relationship with Marcus. I was really determined to make it work. So I attended therapy sessions, read self-help books since I had become a lover of alcohol. I was somehow an alcohol addict, so I needed all the help I could get and make amends for my infidelity. Marcus, too, was doing his part to heal and move forward. I was glad that he was willing to meet me halfway and get to the bottom of everything. We both knew that our love was worth fighting for, and we were determined to make it work. Even though it became a huge struggle to regain his trust again, especially around men, but I was glad that he was trying. As the months passed, our love began to heal and grow stronger. We learned to communicate openly and honestly, to trust each other again, and to appreciate the beauty of our second chance at love. We realized that our marriage was not a destination, but a journey, and we were grateful to be on that journey together. Even though we faced a bit of roller coaster rides because of our past, but as much as I was the one who was wrong in the whole thing, he also realized that he was also at fault and he didn't have to leave me in Portugal, especially on our anniversary holiday, to attend his work. A lot was said and done until one fateful day that made all the effort that we had made go down the drain like a used water. So as we were busy spending family quality time, I received a call from an unsaved number. And to my surprise, the number that was calling me was Jake. I didn't know what was wrong with him, so I asked what he wanted, and the poor guy poured his heart out on the phone, confessing his love for me. Mind you, Marcus and I had started to put our phones on loudspeakers whenever we got calls from unknown or unsaved numbers if we were spending time together. So, during the call, I didn't even know what to do. I saw Marcus's face change immediately from a soft and happy face to a furious face within minutes. He got pretty angry to a point that he snatched my phone and threw it on the wall. I didn't know what to do. Luckily, the children were not in the room. I tried asking what was going on and why he was angry like that and smashing my phone on the wall. He started swearing at me and asking me what was going on between Jake and I. I told him that nothing was going on, and I didn't even know where Jake had gotten my number because we didn't exchange numbers when we were in Portugal. He didn't believe me and told me that I had been making him a fool all this time. He shouldn't have given me another chance. I tried reasoning with him, but he didn't believe any word that came out of my mouth. I just couldn't believe that after so many times we were trying to fix our marriage and renew our love. Jake decided to call right when my relationship with my husband was back to where it was. You know when they say someone was followed by a very dark cloud or had bad lucks, that was me. Marcus believed that I had been in a relationship with Jake the whole time, and he decided to continue with divorce drafting, and he moved out of the house. 3 days later, I got a call from our family lawyer asking if I was in the house so she would come through. After some time, she arrived to serve me with divorce papers. I knew there and then that there was no more turning back. My marriage was done and dusted, and there was really nothing I would have done to fix it this time around. All thanks to Jake for breaking up my marriage, my family had fallen apart and destroyed beyond repair because of the person I kissed like twice, but he decided to catch feelings. Some people have no sense of humor. As handsome as Jake was, I hated him for being the reason why my marriage was over. If he didn't call, none of that would have happened, but the stupid and unthinking man did. Since Marcus and I were not married under community property, I was left with nothing, and there was nothing to fight for if I were to fight. But he was gracious enough to leave me a house and a car since he had bought them under my name. One thing I would be grateful for was that he made a fair decision on making joint custody of our children. They were going to stay with me and visit him wherever he would be staying. I was grateful for the love, teachings, and everything he had given me. That man loved me, and if I were to take back everything, even the time, I would take back the moments I had shared with Marcus since we had started dating, from the day he started asking me till our last day together. Even today, I still regret the mistake I had made because it was the reason that had destroyed my marriage and my family. Now all I do is live for myself and my children. My surfing skills got even much better, and I had started checking for surfing competitions. It was time to let go and start afresh. Time to cry over a spilt milk was not going to work. So far, I would say life has been good to me. Even Jake had not called me, and I was very much grateful for that because I wanted nothing to do with him. I don't know if I made the right decision, though, to let my husband go just like that and how I dealt with the Jake situation. Please help me with advice. How do you think I should have dealt with the issue?
Hi, Redditors. I have a confession to make. I cheated on my husband and he tied up my affair and beat him up and also ruined my life while at it. Why did I cheat on my husband? It was the work of the devil. I regret doing it now because I've learnt my lesson. The reason why I cheated was such a small thing and I can't believe it either. Well, I had suspected, or I had thought rather, he cheated on me first, which I was proven wrong, and he decided to hold my leash too tight. Sure, I was married to him, but that didn't make me his dog. I was a human being, so I told him I didn't need him in my business and him watching over me. You guys, my husband found out that I was having an affair and decided to teach us both a lesson. Why did I cheat on my husband? Well, I was tired. I was tired of him telling me what to do and when to do. My husband was a control freak and a things always have to go his way kind of person. I started looking outside because I couldn't deal with that anymore. I fell out of love with my husband and I cheated on him with someone he would never have expected in a million years. His trusted advisor. I cheated on my husband with the person that he trusted the most, and he sent me the divorce papers immediately. It wasn't meant to end up like this. But my ex-husband, I'll call him Richard for the sake of secrecy, was always busy with his political meetings, so I set my eyes on the person who had always been around and asking about my well-being. His friend and legal counsel. This was the person that had advised Richard to go into politics, so while Richard was busy with his campaign, I was sneaking into his friend Paul's fake name bedroom. Paul was everything my ex-husband had stopped being. Loving, caring, loyal, and most of all attentive. Paul came to the house and I forgot all my problems. I didn't mean for it to happen. I regret losing my marriage because my husband had warned me. But when he found out, he was brutal with his revenge. We had a fight, my ex-husband and I. I had told Richard that I was done with putting up fake smiles and him telling me what to do and watching me in case I disgraced him in public and telling me how to live my life. I told him I didn't need him watching over my life because he was literally. He had hired a bodyguard to stalk my whereabouts just because of his political campaign, and I didn't want that. I had already had it up to my neck with him telling me how to talk in public and act whenever we go for events. And the press had been something else. I don't know how I had managed to keep my affair a secret from them and not from Richard. After our fight, I had gone to see Paul, and like always, he made me forget that I was quarreling with my husband. Paul treated me so good I didn't know that was the last time I was going to see him. And I didn't know that 2 days later my life would change and I would regret my actions. I complained to Paul that night and he gave me some good D, and I didn't think about the consequences. 2 days later, I got back home from my nail appointment and walked into an empty bedroom. Like my bedroom was completely emptied of my clothes and personal belongings. It didn't even show any signs that it had been my bedroom before. Perplexed, I had gone down to Richard's office and found Paul tied up to one of the seats with his eyes wide and sweat pouring over his face. My husband had just sat across on his desks with his arms folded. It was like he had been waiting for me all day. There were also pictures on the desk, pictures of me and Paul in a not-so-friendly embrace. There was also one of Paul and I kissing. How had he gotten pictures of us in Paul's house? I had no idea. Or I actually had an idea. The security detail I had thought I had avoided whenever I went to see Paul. I had never actually lost him. He has still been following me and reporting back to my husband. How could I have been so stupid? I got down on my knees and began begging for forgiveness. Everything dawned in front of my eyes and how I was going to lose 10 years of my life, just because I hadn't wanted my husband controlling my life and telling me what to do. And I had fallen into the temptation of another man, and now I was going to lose my husband. My husband wasn't having any of my begging. He called his security details and they carried Paul away. I had no idea where they carried Paul away to, but my husband commanded me to sit and told me that he was going to make my life 10 times harder if I didn't sit and obey what he had to say. I sat like someone had offered me another life. Richard had told me that he was going to still be married to me till he won the election. Then he would think about what he would do to me. He seized all the cards I had access to and all the property he had gotten for me and promised to give them back if I behaved. How did this all start? I had been in a loving relationship and marriage with my husband for 10 years, and I hadn't once looked another man's way. But I got fed up and frustrated with the lifestyle my husband started living. My husband didn't do nice things for me anymore. It was only to pass judgment and tell me how to behave myself and conduct myself and the appropriate things to do and say, and I felt like I was being caged. All these started up when my husband decided he wanted to run for a Senate position. Yeah, my husband said he wants to get into a place of power. This was how everything went to shit in my marriage. I didn't know how we got here. I hated it, and it pushed me to do what I never imagined myself doing, and that was cheating on my husband. Don't come for me, guys. I regret my actions, and I don't know how else to beg my husband that I was sorry for what I did, and he should take me back. My name is Michelle. My middle name, of course, from my Meemaw. I can't afford for my husband to view this post and trace it back to me. I'm 36 years old. I'll call my husband Richard for the sake of secrecy, and he's 45 years old. I met my husband in college. He was a keynote speaker to one lecture my faculty held on a particular day, and I found him interesting and intellectual. He was smart. My ex-husband is still smart, but anyway, that was what had pulled me to him in the first place. I loved how he could say things and still not make me look stupid. After the lecture, I had summoned the courage and went to meet him, and the rest was history. We became friends, and from there started hanging out a lot. My husband and I shared the same goals. Well, not exactly the same, but something similar. He wanted a big family, and I wanted a family too. After I graduated from college, he asked me to be his girlfriend and paid for my master's degree. Yes, this was the beginning of my husband's controlling tendencies, but I had been blindly in love with him to take note of what he was doing, or what it was. He fully funded my schooling for my master's degree and told me I had to get a second degree to my name if I wanted to be relevant in the career world. I had accepted it and had done my master's, and then once I was done, Richard had popped the question. I had been ecstatic to marry him. I was in love with him back then and couldn't wait to build my life with him. Plus, Richard was a fine man, he still is, and I had thought that with him as my husband that I was going to make fine children. Richard and I got married in an elaborate and elegant event. His parents had been there to give me off. They practically knew me, and I was already like a daughter to them, and since I had no parents, they had decided to give me off. I had cried my eyes out on that day. Anyway, our wedding had been everything I had dreamed of, and I had gotten married to the best man. Life with Richard was great, and I had spent 10 years loving him faithfully and not looking the other way. I don't know what the heck entered me, but I got too paranoid with him. 3 years into our marriage, Richard said he didn't want children anymore, that it would spoil our marriage and the love we have for each other. I didn't argue about that. I just wanted to do anything that would please him. Richard said I should do this. I went and got it done. Richard told me that I needed to learn a skill and be good at it. I went ahead and did just that. That was the summary of my marriage to Richard. I lived and breathed my husband, and I didn't have any complaints about it. But everything changed once we celebrated our 10th year wedding anniversary, which was earlier last year. Richard said he wanted to begin his political career. You All My Life was about to take a slightly different turn than the norm. My husband announced this to friends and family, and most importantly, me, on the night of our wedding anniversary. He hadn't called me aside to talk to me and tell me this was how things were going to go. I was literally finding out on the night that everybody was finding out. I was pissed as hell. I should have suspected because he had come to me all of a sudden with talks of how we should get kids and how I needed to visit the hospital for checks so they would know the way forward from there. Can you guys imagine that this was the same man that had said he didn't want kids a few years into our marriage? And all of a sudden he changed his mind like a switch of the light. Richard had booked the appointment for me at the hospital and had even accompanied me. And after the test, the doctor was just rattling on and on about surrogacy and donor egg, and I didn't even know my ex-husband had been taking it seriously then. All through our time with the doctor, I had just been wondering what was wrong with Richard, and if he was okay. Turns out I didn't have to guess what was wrong for long because this man announced to everyone on our wedding anniversary that he wanted to go into politics. This had been why he suddenly wanted children, or at least a child, so we could make the picture of a perfect loving family. After our wedding anniversary party, I had confronted him to ask why he hadn't told me of his plans, and Richard said he didn't see any need to tell me as I wasn't funding his career, or was of any other use to him except being the perfect loving wife for the camera. He didn't see the need to tell me because I was unimportant in the grand scheme of things. Over the coming days, Richard's days got so overly busy. I would only get to see my husband when he was rising up from bed and when he was coming in to sleep at night. Sometimes I wouldn't even see him in a day or two, and he would come back the next morning. His secretary was almost always in our house, and with her close proximity and access to my husband, I got jealous. But this wasn't what made me act out. I'm getting to that. I had just confronted my husband about how I didn't like his secretary in my house all the time, and my ex-husband stopped coming home. I had to go to his office to beg him and ask for forgiveness. But I had done that because I had loved Richard, and I still do. However, this was when the seeds of doubt that he was cheating began to plant itself in my mind. How could one spend so much time in the office and not even bother about the wife they kept at home? So I decided to test out my theory on Richard, to see if he has still cared about me. Wrong mistake. I found out he didn't. Richard didn't care about me except it was affecting his reputation somehow. I started going out more with my friends and spending days out of the house. Richard never called to check up on me. I doubt that he even knew what I was up to during this time, lol. I had fun with my friends and my husband didn't think to ask if I was breathing. I think this was what put in the idea to cheat on him in my head. For one thing, he wasn't asking about me, and he didn't care what I was doing with my life. Plus, I met guys and people. I experienced freedom without my husband on my neck. It was something great. I was having the time of my life without my husband caring. But then I remembered why I had gone on this spree in the first place, to see if my husband cared about me. And no, this wasn't when my affair started up. I was just a woman who loved her husband very much and wanted his attention. But he was so busy with getting his goals that he neglected his wife. And I didn't stick around in good faith, and I have to live with regret. Then the political activities began properly, and our day got filled with a whole lot of campaigning, and Richard's control tendencies hit an all-time high. I want to shock you guys. I was literally told what to wear to each event, and then told what to do, and how I was just to wave quietly by the side of Richard, and smile at everything being said. At first, I was like it was going to be easy. This was what I had thought in my head. I was going to smile and wave for the camera and press, and this was important to my husband, so I was going to do it. Where it all went wrong was when it became too hectic for me to do. I was supposed to do everything by the book, not talk, just smile and wave and attend parties. But no matter what I seemed to do, there was this letdown on Richard's face, like I wasn't good enough or I wasn't smart enough or something. There was this event we attended. It was kind of a party gathering, I think for everyone to get to know each other and their families and whatnot. I attended with my husband, of course, and he warned me not to say anything. Note, he told me not to say anything. I heeded his warning when we got to the party and was simply all smiles and nods. Then I think his opponent in the party, they were contesting for the same position, walked up to us and tried to make small talk. I didn't have any problems with it until the man directed a question at me. He had asked me how I felt knowing my husband might occupy the position he was vying for. I can't mention the position, obviously, for privacy's sake. I stood there because I was trying to obey my husband's words, and the man was looking at me like I was a mute. You guys wouldn't believe my husband had the audacity to shout at me when we got home that night. He couldn't believe he had married a dull woman, and I had to fix up if I was going to be accompanying him to events for his campaign. How would you feel if you had been in my shoes? These had been all the things that built up to me starting an affair behind my husband's back. Another occurrence was when he downplayed me in front of his sister, who I was older than, and told her how if he couldn't get a child from me, he was going to get it from someone else. Now that I think about it, Richard may not have said that, and it could have been his sister just trying to taunt. Well, she was one of the reasons my marriage got ruined. His sister came to stay with us in our house during my husband's campaign period. She was the only family he had left, with his parents dying in a crash some years back. I missed them. They would have helped me beg my ex-husband to take me back. Anyway, Richard told his sister to come stay with us so we could present a united happy family front while we were still working on having a baby. Richard didn't want to go the normal route of having a baby anymore. When I had asked him, he had said that it was time-consuming and he didn't have the time to wait around. He didn't want to adopt either, so Richard had opted for the artificial method, in vitro fertilization. I went ahead with the idea as long as it gave me the child I wanted for so long. We started the process, and I still followed my husband on his campaign activities. This was when I got to know Paul. I know, hilarious, right? I threw away the life I had with a man I had known for 10 years for a man I had just met in a few nights. Feel free to judge me. I met Paul for the first time during one of Richard's events, and we hit it off. He was easygoing and chill and didn't make me feel nervous about attending interviews and the likes. Whereas Richard, on the other hand, I had chalked it up to the stress and pressure to win on my husband, but my heart didn't want to see reason with that fact. Richard began getting a lot of backlash because we didn't have a child yet, and the papers and media channels always prodded him on that fact whenever he went on interviews. I mean, his goal was to be a good leader. What the heck did that have to do with having a child? But we had still been trying out the IVF method. I wanted to carry a baby on my own. We tried the first time, and I lost the baby by the time 2 weeks had rolled over. The press had gotten wind of this, and trust me, they had a field day with it. This made Richard even detach from me more. And then one evening when we had been having dinner, he had shut me down when I had told him I wanted to donate to a charity on his behalf. He was like I should first carry a child and stop disgracing him. I'm sure you understand now why I had to lash out and cheat on him. Well, I should have just talked it out with him and told him, but I decided to seek counsel and friend, especially when his sister had added insult to the injury and told me that if her brother, my husband, had just not married me from nowhere, he could have had a child by now. That had been very hurtful, and Paul had been right there with open arms, so I fell into it. My husband won his party's election and emerged his party's candidate for the position he wanted, and the security got tighter, but I had made it work. And my husband was paying no mind to me, or so I thought. I went to see Paul at least 2 days in a week while my husband was stuck in the office or doing some political gibbery. After the first attempt at IVF, the second attempt, the doctor advised us to go for a surrogate as my body couldn't handle the process of being with child. I had cried that day and my husband had just told me it was okay, and I had to lean on Paul for kindness. I slept with Paul after some time of him being friends with him. I should have stopped it just once and found a way to apologize to my husband, but I didn't. The activities added, and sometimes I wouldn't see my husband for 3 days at a stretch. Paul was always in the house during this time, and one thing led to another. Our relationship turned into an affair. I couldn't risk having the affair in my house, so Paul and I agreed to have it in his house. I began dodging security details and paparazzi all to see Paul, until my husband caught us and I found Paul tied up. You guys know the rest. I hope my husband forgives me because I've learned my lesson. Update. A year later. I'm back with an update. My husband won the position he was vying for. He won it by a landslide. Apparently, that was the only thing to celebrate. Richard divorced me and sent me packing without a dime to my name. I even had to move to another city because he made life difficult for me with the power he got. The surrogate gave him a child and he took full custody of the child. I couldn't even afford to attest him in court because I didn't have the money, and I knew he would dust my behind on the benches of the court, so I respected myself, but I cried. I had been crying a lot, actually, since Richard served me divorce papers. 10 years and nothing to show for it. I hadn't needed to work because he had told me not to, and now I had no work experience. I had no money. He had blocked all access to his accounts, including my savings account. It had been opened in his name. I had nothing. However, what had pained me most was the fact that I wouldn't have any right to my child. Richard knew that was one thing I had wanted since getting married, and he had denied me that, and the smile on his face when he had said that was as devilish as anything. According to him, it was appropriate revenge for almost costing him his political career. It had turned out that Paul was a scam and wanted to get insight to ruin my husband's career, and if my husband hadn't caught him, he would have released my pictures to the internet and then spoilt Richard's career. Because of my stubbornness and paranoia, I had cost myself the one thing I truly wanted and my husband.